Welcome back, Focus Learners. Today we are diving into another explainer, and wow, do we have an absolutely fascinating journey ahead of us. We're looking at 5 cutting-edge technologies that are doing something completely unprecedented. They're collectively blurring the lines between the natural world, the one we inherited, and the engineered world we're actively building. I mean, we are talking about rewriting the very fabric of reality, zooming all the way from the absolute smallest subatomic particles in the universe right up to the massive global networks that connect us all.
Okay, let's dive into this scale-based journey. Here's our roadmap. We'll start with the quantum leap, then look at engineering the infinitesimal. After that, we'll cover programming the living world, move into the neural bridge, and finally, wrap things up with distributed trust. First up, Section 1, the quantum leap. We're scaling way down to subatomic computation.
To really grasp why this is such a game changer, we kind of have to look back at classical computing. For decades, the silicon chips inside your laptop, your phone, your smartwatch, they've all run entirely on a binary paradigm. They encode information strictly in zeros and ones. It's either on or it's off. Simple, right? But quantum computing, it basically throws that old rulebook right out the window. It leverages the wild, highly non-intuitive principles of quantum mechanics to represent information as qubits.
So the crucial point here is a little thing called superposition. Because a qubit isn't forced to be just a 0 or a 1, it can actually exist in multiple states simultaneously. Think of a coin sitting on a table. It's either heads or tails, right? That's your classical computer. But if you flick that coin and it's spinning rapidly on the table, well, while it's spinning, it's essentially both heads and tails at the exact same time. That is superposition. And it isn't just some neat physics parlor trick. It's the secret sauce that allows quantum computers to perform certain types of calculations exponentially faster than any conventional machine ever could. We're talking about solving massive, mind-bending problems that classical computers inherently just can't handle.
And the speed at which this leap is happening is just incredible. Back in 1981, pioneers like Richard Feynman and David Deutsch first conceptualized the framework. They realized classical computers were pretty terrible at simulating quantum systems. Then, boom! 1994 hits with a massive shockwave. Peter Shor proves that quantum algorithms can actually factor large integers exponentially faster. That literally posed a direct threat to modern encryption overnight. By 1996, Love Grover advances quantum search algorithms. And that brings us to today. You've got tech giants like IBM, Google, and Rigetti locked in this intense race to build scalable architectures. But they're fighting an ongoing engineering struggle against environmental noise and what's known as decoherence, which is basically the fragile quantum state collapsing back into normal physics. If they can make these machines stable, we're looking at total revolutions in fields from drug discovery to material science.
Let's move to Section 2 and see how this builds as we step slightly up in scale. Engineering the infinitesimal, the atomic precision of nanotechnology.
The ultimate boundary of this specific frontier is the number 100. Nanotechnology is all about the deliberate manipulation and design of matter at the scale of 1 to 100 nanometers. When things get this incredibly tiny, materials basically stop behaving normally. The traditional rules of physics kind of warp, and things become heavily influenced by those exact quantum mechanical effects we were just talking about. Now, to give you a real sense of just how microscopic this is, brace yourself for this. Literally thousands of these engineered structures could easily fit right across the width of a single human hair. It is a dimension of engineering completely invisible to the naked eye, yet it holds absolutely massive physical power. To build at this scale, nanotechnology relies on 2 primary strategies. First, you have top-down fabrication. This uses lithography processes, kind of like a sculptor carefully carving a statue out of a giant block of marble. It's exactly how we produce modern microchips. Conversely, there's bottom-up assembly. This relies on chemical processes where molecules naturally self-organize into stable patterns. Think of it like a crystal organically growing, atom by atom. Interestingly, while Richard Feynman envisioned this atomic-level engineering way back in 1959, it was purely theoretical until 1981. That's when Gerd Benning and Heinrich Rohr invented the scanning tunneling microscope, which finally let scientists image and literally move individual atoms around. Today, bridging physics and chemistry like this is giving us ultra-strong carbon nanotubes and targeted nanoparticles that can deliver drugs directly to diseased tissues.
Okay, let's keep zooming out. Section 3, programming the living world, synthetic biology and the bioeconomy.
We're transitioning from physics and chemistry straight into biology. And biology is no longer just an observational science. It is a science of design, where DNA is treated exactly like programmable software. The acceleration here has been absolutely staggering. In the early 2000s, scientists started creating genetic circuits to control how cells behave. Right at the turn of the millennium, Michael Elowitz demonstrated the repressilator. He actually created a synthetic circuit that turned living bacteria into blinking, rhythmically glowing microscopic neon lights. But the true landmark feat came a decade later in 2010. J. Craig Venter created a completely synthetic bacterial genome from scratch, dropped it into a host cell, and produced a living organism controlled entirely by artificially synthesized code. Let that sink in. We literally booted up life from a computer sequence.
And this brings us to a foundational concept empowering this whole era: BioBricks. You can think of them a lot like microscopic Lego blocks. Scientists are using these standardized biological parts to deliberately construct living systems and very specific biological functions using rigorous structural engineering principles. We are literally designing biological machines.
The practical applications for these BioBricks are going to directly shape our future. We're talking about designing algae-based biofuels to cleanly power our vehicles, or engineering super-resilient crops that can naturally survive extreme droughts. We're looking at producing synthetic insulin far more securely and affordably, deploying special microorganisms coded specifically to eat up and break down toxic environmental pollutants, and even synthesizing complex industrial chemicals completely cleanly. This paradigm shift, designing biological functions from the ground up, is driving a 21st century bioeconomy, and it could easily be just as transformative to human history as the Industrial Revolution was in the 19th century. Zooming out even further, to the scale of the human body and mind. Section 4. The Neural Bridge. Human-Machine Symbiosis Through Brain-Computer Interfaces, or BCIs.
This is where neuroscience and engineering boldly collide. The human anchors of BCI development map out such a fascinating progression. Back in the mid-20th century, pioneers like Gray Walter and José Delgado laid the early groundwork with their explorations of neurophysiology. Fast forward to the 1990s, and Jonathan Wolpaw is developing non-invasive EEG-based systems, basically allowing people with motor disabilities to interact with computers using their brainwaves. Around that same time, John Donahue really pushed the boundaries with intracortical techniques. This meant implanting tiny sensors directly inside the brain, achieving incredibly high-fidelity neural decoding straight from the motor cortex.
And this brilliantly illustrates how the neuroengineering magic actually happens today. It's basically a four-step loop. First, the system has to filter and amplify those raw, tiny neural signals. Second, it applies a heavy-duty machine learning decoding algorithm to figure out the user's actual intent from all the chaotic, constant noise bouncing around the brain. Third, it translates that specific intent into an actionable command output, like moving a robotic arm across a desk or typing words on a screen. And finally, it provides sensory feedback right back to the user. This isn't science fiction anymore. This is how we're actively restoring mobility and communication to individuals living with ALS or severe paralysis right now. Which brings us to a massive pivot. We've scaled from subatomic qubits up through atoms, engineered cells, and human brains. Now let's zoom all the way out to our final macro-level scale, global human networks. So here is the big question. How do we establish trust without authority?
Section 5. Distributed trust, blockchain, and decentralized systems.
Think about it. Traditionally, human society has relied entirely on centralized authority. We inherently have to trust banks, governments, or massive tech giants to hold our data securely and verify our transactions. Decentralized systems completely flip that legacy model on its head. Instead of having one giant central hub, control and verification are distributed across a vast, worldwide network of independent participants. So trust is no longer handed over to an institution, it's practically embedded directly into the technological architecture itself.
Now, what's really interesting about this structural shift is that the modern era of it began back in 2008. That's when the pseudonymous Satoshi Nakamoto proposed Bitcoin. It elegantly solved what's called the double spending problem. Basically, that's the massive headache of making sure a purely digital dollar isn't secretly copied and spent twice, and doing it entirely without needing a bank to check the math. The mechanics here are absolutely brilliant. Transaction records are grouped into blocks, and each block is cryptographically linked or chained to the one right before it. If someone tries to go back and alter a past record, it immediately becomes mathematically obvious to the entire network. By relying on consensus mechanisms like proof of work, pure cryptography ends up completely replacing institutional authority.
And this goes way beyond just cryptocurrency. This foundational shift is enabling decentralized finance, entirely secure voting systems, and totally transparent global supply chains.
So take a breath and step back to look at the massive journey we've just taken. From harnessing the mind-bending superposition of quantum mechanics and physically moving individual atoms at the nanoscale, to booting up completely synthetic cells, plugging digital interfaces straight into the human motor cortex, and finally, building global, authority-free ledgers of truth, we are looking squarely at the blur. All of these incredible paradigms point to one unified future, where the boundary between what is naturally born and what is meticulously engineered is becoming increasingly, undeniably fluid.
I want to leave you with one final, provocative thought to chew on today. As we master this incredible ability to program literally everything, from subatomic qubits and biological DNA, all the way up to human cognition and global networks of trust, what will it actually mean to be human in a reality that we have fully, completely engineered? Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. Keep asking those big questions, stay curious, and I'll catch you on the next one.